Originally, TV8 was on the air 28 hours a week. That schedule has now more than quadrupled to 133 hours per week. What about some of the early shows that filled that time, before tape and before there was even a coast-to-coast network? As Jack Gross pointed out, one of the earliest problems was selling TV sets. Remember Hoffman Easy Vision? Well, they sponsored a contest called Hoffman High Time, which helped keep the station on the air and helped sell more receivers. Then there was a program called Quiz of Two Cities, using a studio audience in San Diego and another group in Los Angeles. The San Diegans kept winning the quiz, and the LA station eventually canceled its half of the show. Smokey Rogers presided over a 3-hour-long country western telethon every weekday for several years. Smokey and his band, the Myers Sisters, Carol Salentine, and numerous recording stars were staples of San Diego television for a long time. In addition, Smokey did a radio show every morning from his own home and emceed a western movie on TV8. Another country star who had a large following on TV8 was the late Monty Hall. Quite a variety of persons paid visits to his tiny town ranch in the 50s.
Programs have come and gone. During various years, TV8 has had cooking shows, a magic show, live highlight games from Tijuana, bingo, and roller derby. And there even was a one-shot attempt at putting 2 movies on the screen at the same time. The experiment never was repeated. During all the experimentation, the trial and the error, there has been one thing TV8 started in 1949 that's been on the air ever since: the news.
One of the charter members of the TV8 Club is Harold Keene, who's still doing his thing 20 years later. His thing is interviews, and Harold estimates he's done about 15,000 of them during his television career. Harold's face is undoubtedly one of the most familiar ones on San Diego television.
Mr. Keene, K-E-E-N, Keene. Mr. Keene, Keene, K-E-E-N, Keene. Like a knife.
Keen like a knife, the kind of incisive reporting that's become this man's trademark. But in addition to all the hard news he's covered, Harold Keene recalls some of the lighter moments in his career.
Early days of TV, before the widespread use of film or videotape, things seem to be a lot more spontaneous than they are today. If a guest didn't show up, we did most of our stuff live in those days, and if a guest didn't show up, we probably would either not have a show or have to depend on one of our own staff to come on as a substitute and tell about his own thrilling experiences of the past. It really has been a fascinating 20 years. Some 15,000 persons have been interviewed on People in the News during this time, including some of the world's most famous people, but my favorites really are the local people, the ordinary, so-called ordinary San Diegans who've suddenly been thrust into the spotlight because of some dramatic occurrence in their lives. And we hope to continue meeting such people from day to day with more People in the News, perhaps another 20 years.
Harold Keene started interviewing people in the news in 1949. 2 years later, TV8 added the San Diego newsreel and hired Paul White as news director. Paul White, one of the pioneers of electronic journalism, is regarded as the father of radio news. One of those who remembers Paul White best is TV8 news director Ray Wilson.
We started our full-fledged news operation in 1951 with 6 people: Paul White, Harold Keene, Stuart Batt, our news editor. I was there, and we had 2 cameramen. This was a pretty ambitious project, really, because we had to put out 30 minutes of news every night. We had one of the most extensive news operations on the entire West Coast at that time. And it was quite a struggle finding 30 minutes of news every evening, believe me. Now, of course, we put out 90 minutes at 6 o'clock, 5:30, and we have another 30 minutes at 11 o'clock. And we have now grown to about 18 persons in the news department. Paul White was head of CBS News during World War II. He oversees the work of Edward R. Murrow, William L. Shirer, and many others of similar prominence. His basic principles were accuracy, objectivity, impartiality. All of these principles we have tried to follow since he began the news department. We still have many of the scripts that he wrote, and occasionally we refer to them as editorials and his commentaries. He left CBS News after World War II because of his health. When he came here, he was in frail health, but still he had a drive, and he was a fierce competitor. And he refused to accept excuses when you came back with a story that wasn't as good as that of the opposition. And that's one of the things I remember best about him, his inability to accept second-best reporting.
And the one fellow who I thought